Welcome back. Automatic spending cuts due in 3 weeks, of course, known as sequestration. And that's the flashpoint in Washington today. And it may soon be a flashpoint on Wall Street. The president today warned that the GOP, the cuts that are coming from the GOP would hurt the economy. He said he is still hopeful for a bigger deal to address the debt and the deficit.
A lot to talk about with our next guest. To get reaction from Capitol Hill from Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. We welcome you, Senator. Do you think we are going to get a deal on the sequestration issue before March 1st?
Well, you know, all these people carping about a sequestration being harmful to the economy, that would presume that the government creates wealth by spending money. I think that's a ridiculous Keynesian notion that's been disproved for the last 40 years. So I think cutting spending is precisely what you should do to spur the economy. When money comes to Washington and is spent, that's how it's disruptive and spent inefficiently. Let's leave that money in the marketplace.
Are you saying you want to see the sequester happen?
The sequester barely cuts any icing off the top of the cake. Spending is going to rise $9 trillion over the next 10 years. The sequester takes $1 trillion off of that. Spending still goes up $8 trillion over the next 10 years. That's why Bowles-Simpson said we need at least $4 trillion. And that's why people like me who are truly fiscally conservative say freeze spending. But you know what a freeze in spending would be? That would be considered to be a $9 trillion cut if we don't spend more than we're currently spending.
Senator, we want to get back to sequestration in a moment because it's an interesting point that you bring up. But the way sequestration is scheduled now, it's sort of throwing darts. We don't even know what missions are going to get impacted by the cuts in defense. But first, I want to get your reaction to what the president said today. Listen to this.
They recognize that the sequester is a bad idea. But what they've suggested is that the only way to replace it now is for us to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, and not close a single loophole, not raise any additional revenue from the wealthiest Americans or corporations.
We have an ideological chasm here, Senator.
The president wants more revenue, Senator. What about that?
Here's the thing is, you've got a president who's not willing to lead or save Social Security or save Medicare. They're both bankrupt. Social Security spends and gives out more than comes in. Medicare gives out $3 for every dollar that comes in, and he's taking them off the table and accusing Republicans of wanting to cut them. We're the ones who want to save the entitlement programs, but they will only be saved by reforming them. He takes them off the table and says, oh, let's go squeeze more money out of rich people. It really is, it boggles my mind that we could have elected a president that is so out of touch that he's going to continue to play these old canards about, oh, Republicans don't want to save the entitlements. We're trying to save the entitlements.
This is where we are right now. This is the reality. He wants more revenue. So what are you going to do?
He was reelected.
Yeah, and it's a mistake to reelect him, and it's also a mistake to squeeze more money out of the private economy. That's where jobs are created. I want to leave more money in the private economy and send less money to Washington. He wants to do the opposite. He's wrong, and he's why the economy is languishing, because his policies are wrong and have been wrong for a long time.
I wanted to ask you, apparently at the Democratic retreat, he also, according to sources, said that he wanted to spend the next couple of years making sure that the Democrats can take back the House and put Nancy Pelosi back in the speakership there. Sounds like we're going to have a fun next couple of years. What are your thoughts?
You know, I'm not really excited about seeing Nancy Pelosi speaker again. I don't think that will happen. I think Americans are going to wake up. When Americans discover how bad Obamacare is, and when Obamacare starts bankrupting state governments, I think you're going to see a huge rebellion against this president and his policies. If Republicans can get our act together.
When are they going to figure that out, Senator? I mean, we've been talking about Obamacare for a long time now, and it's already costing businesses, an enormous amount of money and stopping them from hiring any new heads to the payroll. So when are we going to figure this out, in your view?
Well,
when do you think that happens?
When Republicans begin to present our message better, and we tell people whether you're rich, poor, or middle class, you'll have more jobs and more money if we leave money in your state, leave money in your pocket, and that's how the economy will grow. When people figure that out, I think they'll come back to the Republican Party. But they also have to see that what he's planning for us is it is bankrupting us as we speak. We're borrowing $50,000 a second, and it can't go on.
$1,000 is the second
I know.
one.
Let me ask you about one other issue before we let you go here, and this is a pet project of your father's for years. He wanted to audit the Federal Reserve. He introduced legislation. In fact, it passed the House last year, as you well know. You're reintroducing this now in the Senate, and Representative Brown is doing it in the House right now. I can understand wanting to audit a Federal Reserve under Alan Greenspan or under Paul Volcker years ago. But now you have Ben Bernanke, who has made the Fed more transparent. He's got these news conferences going. They've opened up the minutes. I mean, what is it that you don't know about the Federal Reserve that you'd want to know by auditing their books? An independent agency, by the way.
Yeah, I think people need to know that the Federal Reserve has probably been the biggest culprit towards the worsening of the business cycle that we've had. We have a much more disruptive business cycle than we ever had before we had the Federal Reserve. People need to know that interest rates, the price of money, needs to fluctuate like other prices. And when the Federal Reserve sets the interest rates, it incorporates and brings in these massive boom-bust cycle, the housing bubble being the most prominent of these, and that the Federal Reserve needs to be scrutinized. It needs more scrutiny.
What would an audit accomplish, though, in that regard?
An audit would let us look back at their policy. It's a look-back thing. It's about a year-old data, but would allow us to see what they're doing. There are still some things that are unknown about what went on. Some people say as many as $7 trillion worth of money was trading around during the banking crisis of 2008. I think people deserve to know about it. This is an agency that's a quasi-government agency, but we, the taxpayers, deserve to know more about how it's being run.
Senator, final question here. What are you going to do in these next couple of weeks to ensure that the president does not take this fight to the public, which seems to be what he's doing once again, pushing the Republicans in the corner that it's your fault and your colleagues' fault that we're going to see this sequestration, we're going to see all these cuts come because you have not had a plan and you refuse to raise more revenue?
Yeah, I can't stop him from continuing his campaign, but he didn't do so well in my state. 39% of the people agreed with his rhetoric in my state. So what I'll keep saying is taking more money out of Kentucky and sending it to Washington is a big mistake. It's not going to help your son or daughter getting out of college to get a job. In fact, we're losing 1 million jobs a year because of this burden of debt. He just wants to add more to it. It's a mistake for the country.
All right, we'll leave it there. Senator, good to have you on the program.
Thank you,
Thanks
Senator.
so much. We appreciate your time.